Do I start? Yes.
You're on.
All right. Just a minute. Let me change the view here.
You both look good.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Contra Costa Tail Spinners. Another wonderful Zoom opportunity for everybody, and I'm so happy to see you again. Thank you so much for coming. I talked to the library today about when they think they will open their rooms to the public, and she said that they will know after June 15th. And so when we are able to go back to the Orinda Library, which is our home, you will certainly all be notified, but we may want to do both Zoom and library. We'll just see how it goes, because this has been an experience. And you will see tonight that we're going to have our guests from India and our guests from New York. And that would be a long trip to make just for a couple of hours on a Thursday evening. So good evening to you all. And I'd like to open by telling you a little bit about our feature teller, Larry. Larry is a juggler, and so he's very dear to my heart because, you know, my son is a juggler too, and Larry and my son know each other. And he's a trick rope person. And so he started his act with trick rope and juggling, and then he wanted to fill it in. And so he began to do stories, cowboy stories, but not just, you know, movie kind of cowboy stories. I mean, he really looks it up. He gets all the information. He gets the history. He gets the characters, and he just immerses himself in the Old West. And so I want to bring to you a genuine. Do you ride horses?
A little bit.
A little bit. All right, then a genuine, a genuine cowboy, all the way from California, Larry Kruger. Thank you, Larry.
Thank you. Ike Pryor was born in Tampa, Florida in 1852. He was the youngest of 4 boys. When he was 2 years old, his father died of tuberculosis, and his mother moved with her 4 children to Alabama to be near family. Unfortunately, she developed tuberculosis too. Ike was nearly 4 years old when his mother died. The 4 boys were each given to 4 different sisters of Ike's mother. Ike went to an aunt who was married to a doctor. They didn't get along very well, and shortly he was with a second aunt. Within 6 months, he was with a third aunt. This aunt was a widow with 6 children, who was married to a widower with 6 more children. Ike made the 13th. There wasn't much room for him, and being the youngest, he was picked on quite a bit by the other children. But there was Cousin Sally Lightfoot, his aunt's eldest daughter. Cousin Sally was 18 years old, and to Ike, she was an angel. One day, Ike was crying because the other kids wouldn't let him play a game with him. Cousin Sally came over and said, "Ikey, I've got a wonderful gingerbread man baking in the oven. He's just for you. Come on, let's go get him." From that moment on, Ike was like Cousin Sally's own child. She couldn't have loved her own child any more devotedly, and Ike loved her like a mother. She saw to his clothes, stuck up for him with the other children, and let him sleep in her own bed. They grew very close. When Ike was 6.5 years old, a rich uncle named Orville McKissick, who lived in Spring Hill, Tennessee, 40 miles south of Nashville, came to visit. "Why, sister," he said to Ike's aunt, "you've got too many children. You tell me Ikey there is Sister Emma's youngest? I'll take him with me, give him a good home, and educate him." Ike's aunt really didn't want to let him go. Ike and Cousin Sally were both brokenhearted about the idea. But the transfer was made. As Ike was leaving, he resolved to run away and come back to Cousin Sally. Ike's uncle was strict, but in general, he was treated well. And there was no reason to complain. Still, he was terribly homesick for Cousin Sally. Time passed, and word came that Cousin Sally had married and gone off to live in Nashville. When Ike was 9 years old, the Civil War broke out. Shortly after that, his uncle gave him a terrible whipping. After that whipping, Ike resolved to run away and go to Cousin Sally, 40 miles north in Nashville. The idea that he might not be able to find Cousin Sally once he got to Nashville didn't even enter his mind. He was raging mad. He left that afternoon, and by dark, he had gone 9 miles. There were a number of people on the road that day, but they all seemed to be in too much of a hurry to pay much attention to a small boy. And they all seemed to be going the opposite direction. Ike stopped at a toll gate kept by an old lady. Lady, he said, I don't have a penny to pay you, but can I stay all night? I'm going to Nashville. That good old lady led him inside and gave him supper. As he ate, she questioned him. What child? Don't you know there's a terrible war going on and soldiers are all around the countryside? Men are fighting right now between here and Nashville. You're liable to get run over by a horse or shot. Ike didn't know enough about war to be scared. All he knew was he was going to Cousin Sally. He slept on a clean cot, had hot pancakes and eggs at daybreak, and went on. After walking for 2 or 3 miles, he heard gunfire. Then he saw men running and shooting at each other. Instinct told him he should get out of the way, so he crawled into some bushes and lay hidden. The shooting and chasing passed by him, and the sound receded in the direction from which he had come. Ike was behind federal lines now, and Union forces had control of Nashville. That battle actually saved Ike. He learned later that his uncle, learning that he had gone, sent 2 men after him to bring him home. Somehow his uncle found out he was headed to Nashville, but when those 2 men encountered the battle, they turned back. Ike finally made it to Nashville. A city the size of Nashville would have confused a country boy of 9 years old in normal times. But after just being captured by the Union Army, it was in utter confusion. Troops everywhere, business paralyzed, martial law in force. After wandering around for a while, Ike went up to a soldier who seemed to be on guard at a street corner, and he asked him if he could tell him the way to Cousin Sally's. Cousin Sally? The soldier asked. What's your other name? And what street does she live on? I couldn't tell him that. He knew she'd been Cousin Sally Lightfoot before she got married, but he didn't remember the name of the man she married. And being a country boy, he didn't have any idea that streets had names and numbers. All he could do was to continue wandering and asking for Cousin Sally. A person here, a person there had heard of a Sally somebody. He went into hundreds of private homes asking for Cousin Sally. To Ike, it seemed like there were 40,000 Sallys, but not one of them was his cousin. He slept in alleys, in barns, picked scraps of food off garbage heaps, ate nothing at all. In normal times, a child living like this would have been taken in by someone, but this was wartime. Ike wandered for days, continuing his futile search. One morning, he wandered into the camp of the 3rd Ohio Cavalry. There was a man there selling newspapers to the soldiers. He was the proprietor of the camp canteen. Ike got that man to let him sell newspapers. He ate with a squad of soldiers that night and shared a blanket with a soldier at bedtime. Ike became the mascot of the 3rd Ohio Cavalry, and he worked selling newspapers for the canteen proprietor. All the soldiers came to know him and care about his welfare. He stayed with him for quite a while. One night he'd share a blanket with one soldier, the next night with another soldier. When his clothes wore out, he found a soldier's old discarded uniform, cut off the legs, tied up the seat, tied a rope around his waist, and he lived with them in this manner for a number of years, even traveling to battles with them. A stray horse became his. In one battle, that horse was shot dead from beneath him. After he'd been with the federal troops for 2 years, the regimental surgeon, Dr. Worth, began to take notice of him. He let Ike sleep in his tent and often spoke of how wrong it was for a boy of Ike's age to be living the way he was. But the adventure and excitement appealed to Ike, and he was making money. Food, clothing, shelter cost him nothing, so he could save every cent. After a while, he had $100 saved up. That was a lot of money back then, as much as a farmhand could make in 4 or 5 months. He figured he should have some kind of pouch to store it in. So he killed a mole, skinned it, and stuffed that mole skin with bran to dry it out. Then he stuffed his $100 in bills inside the moleskin and stuffed it in his pocket with the hairs pointing down. That was a mistake, because with the hairs pointing down, those hairs pushed against the inside of his pocket, forcing the pouch up and out of his pocket. Only I didn't have any idea where it fell out. The loss of that $100 was one of the most upsetting things in his whole life. After I had been with the federal troops for 3 years, Dr. Worth sent him to live with his wife in Ohio on Lake Erie. All the soldiers bid him farewell and said how they would miss him, but they knew this was the best thing for him. And I had agreed to go, but it wasn't what he expected. He had chores from before daylight, building fires, milking cows, helping to take care of Mrs. Worth's 2 babies, carrying them around, feeding them, changing their diapers. He was grateful to the Worth family, but he missed the carefree life of camp, and he was still terribly homesick for Cousin Sally. He decided that he would go find Cousin Sally in Nashville. He secretly made arrangements with a boat captain to stow away with him when the ice melted and go with him to Nashville. That voyage never took place. While Ike was on Lake Erie, the 3rd Ohio Cavalry, which he had been with, was part of the Union forces surrounding Vicksburg in the Great Battle there. They were running low on supplies, so a captain of the 3rd Ohio Cavalry was sent to Nashville to get more supplies. After loading out 10 miles out of Nashville, he came to a farm that had lots of supplies. And after loading up, he went inside to pay the young woman who lived there. While he was writing out the warrant for payment, the young woman said to him, "Captain, there's a question I ask of every Union soldier I meet. About 3 years ago, while the Union troops were taking Nashville, an orphan named Ike Pryor ran away from his uncle in Spring Hill of this state with the intention of finding me. He never reached me. Captain, I love him like a son, and he loves me like a mother. Captain, have you ever seen or heard of this orphan boy?" While she was talking, the captain stopped writing, and he said to her, "Madam, is your name Sally?" "Why, yes," she said, "but why do you ask? I've already given you my husband's name for the warrant." "Why, madam, I know this boy very well. He slept in my tent many nights. 100 times I've heard him tell how he searched and searched for his cousin Sally in Nashville. The 3rd Ohio Cavalry, which he had been with, is in Vicksburg, Mississippi now, and I am the only one in Tennessee that knows of Ike Pryor. I ride 10 miles this morning, and the first house I stop at, I meet Cousin Sally. It must be the hand of God." He told Cousin Sally where Ike was staying and gave her the address of where she could write to Mrs. Worth. One day, while Ike was picking up the mail for Mrs. Worth, the postmaster called him inside. He took him to a corner for privacy and said to him, "I understand your name is Ike Pryor." "Yes, sir," Ike replied. "I have a letter concerning you." "Who wrote it?" "A relative of yours named Mrs. John O. Ewing, near Nashville, Tennessee." In a flash, the name Ewing came back to Ike. Trembling with excitement, he asked the postmaster to read him the letter. It told how Cousin Sally had found out where he was staying and how she had written many times to Mrs. Worth with no reply. Now she was calling on the postmaster for help in figuring out whether Ike was really staying there and if he was okay. She also wanted him to come live with her. Ike had the postmaster write a letter back to Cousin Sally for him, and she sent that with one of her own to Washington, where it took some official took notice of it, and Ike was soon back with Cousin Sally. Ike was 12 years old now, And for 8 of those years, he'd been passed around from place to place. For the last 3 years, he'd been trying to find cousin Sally. And now he had finally found her, and he found a home. A couple of things. One thing I want to tell you, this is a true story. And I adapted it from a story I found in the book, Cow People by J. Frank Dobby. The book, by the way, has a copyright that has expired, so I didn't have to ask for permission to use it. There probably are a number of questions you might have about things in that time period. One of the things that might have come up is you might have thought, how did the captain know the address or where the address of where Mrs. Worth was? I mean, they were all from Ohio, but those are a lot of people in the company to remember. Well, the US Postal Service was around since the beginning of the country, but at the time of this story, there was no home delivery. So a person to get their mail had to go to the post office to pick it up. So that is how the captain knew, because he knew what town the woman lived in. So if you have any other questions, put them in the chat and I'll try my best to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you, Larry. Thank you so much. I love the way you dig into the stories and find the history and everything of it. And I thought how appropriate that story is now with all the children, you know, migrating up from Mexico, etc. And it's just so appropriate for now and the challenges that they have now, and as well as the challenge that Ike had when he was abandoned and went out into the world. So very good for you. Thank you so much. Good. Yay. All right. Okay. Our next teller is Sue Champanet, who, as you know, went to Philadelphia. But guess what? She's come home, and so she is right here in California to tell you this tale. And we're so pleased to have you. And why don't you just take it away?
Okay, well, as Sally said, last month I moved back to Walnut Creek from Philadelphia. And Philadelphia is 2 hours from where I was born, Scranton, Pennsylvania. And in November 2019, I got a chance to go. That was for Thanksgiving. So, you know, I had Thanksgiving with some relatives, and it was, you know, it was very nice. And I was gonna come back and make a longer trip in the spring, because Scranton, believe it or not, is right by the Poconos, is a pretty place and has a lot of history. Well, we all know what happened. The pandemic happened, and I was in lockdown in Philadelphia in a high rise. And I was in what's called Center City. Oh, just picture me, okay, in the winter, trudging through slushy snow and soot and dragging my little cart to go to the Acme for my groceries. So I decided I was going to come home as soon as spring came, and, you know, it was safe to come home. March, so this was March, and we could have dinner outside. I guess you guys were doing some outside dining too. So I had dinner with my son, Josh, and his girlfriend, Zoe. And, you know, Zoe was helping herself to tidbits on Josh's plate, and she commented on how sweet Josh was and how easy he was for sharing food. And Josh and I both started to laugh. Josh said, "Mom, you gotta tell Zoe this Nana's story about the first time she took you to a restaurant." Well, my mom, Betty, his Nana, was born in Scranton, and she was raised in that East Coast Jewish middle class that followed New York City fashion. My mom understood that what separated humans from the apes was our ability to accessorize and apply eyeliner. She loved to talk about her trips to New York City. She would go to the theater, she would go to for shopping with her sister and mother, and she would go out to lunch. And, you know, she moved from Scranton to California in her 30s with us. And I was 5. And, you know, some of the best times I had with my mom was when we were shopping and having lunch. So this story, I was there, but I was 1 year old. So this is my mom, Betty's memory of the first time she took me to a restaurant. My daughter, Susan, was born in June in Hahnemann Hospital in Scranton, Pennsylvania. And that winter was particularly bitter and ugly. You know, there was coal in the air and the snow, and it was awful. So we just stayed inside all winter. So when spring came and it washed away all of that and flowers came out, well, we were ready to join the Society of Jewish Ladies Who Lunch. And by we, I mean my best friend, Janie Simon. Janie's son, Bobby, was born 2 weeks after Susan. In fact, she took my room at the hospital. So we'd arranged to take the babies to lunch. I bought Susie a new dress, light blue to match her blue eyes. And I put a yellow ribbon in her blonde hair. And I bought myself a new dress, a navy shirtwaist with a crinoline slip to make it stick out. And I put a red belt around my waist and navy pumps. We took a taxi downtown Scranton to the Downtown Grill, the nicest place in town. Sunlight streamed through the picture windows. There were white tablecloths with bud vases with pink roses. The china had pink roses around the rim. The maitre d' remembered our names. He led us to this lovely table in the middle of the restaurant. It was square, and on one side there were 2 high chairs for the babies. So they sat together, and then the moms were on each adjoining side. Well, as we walked in, we saw 6 women seated at a round table by one of the windows. They were the machers of the temple, the women leaders who got things done. Min Horowitz, the president of the sisterhood, came over to our table. "Oh, girls, your babies are adorable. Betty, your sister and mother can't stop talking about how smart Susie is. Oh, and Janie, Bobby looks just like your father." And then she moved on and we ordered drinks. Whiskey sour for me and a daiquiri for Janie. And then, well, it was time to figure out lunch. And I know I'm Jewish and I kept kosher at home, and I kind of kept kosher on the Sabbath when I ate out, but this was Thursday lunch. So I ordered a club sandwich. And we had ordered mashed potatoes for the babies. They were presented in this beautiful china bowl dish for the babies. And I handed Susie her baby spoon, and she just dug right in, such a good eater. Bobby took 2 fingers and stuck them in the mashed potatoes and licked them off. Well, I just bit into that sandwich. Real bacon. And as I smiled and waved at men and the ladies, I heard, wah! Bobby. It was Bobby. Susie was reaching into his bowl, taking a fistful of his mashed potatoes and shoving them into her mouth. Ugh. Everyone in the restaurant was laughing while, Janie tried to calm Bobby and I tried to clean up the wiggly Susie in my lap. And from that day to this, my daughter Susan takes food from other people's plates. And that is why her son Josh shares his food. That's it. Thank you.
Well, now that I know about you, you think I'm going to give you an invitation for lunch? No.
I thought you knew. I thought you heard the story before, and that's why you're so guarded when you eat.
No, I have not. All right. Yes. Well, taking our children to eat out is often very memorable. Yes, I know that too. All right. So wonderful. Thank you so much for your story. I appreciate it. The next teller is Beverly Schwartz from New York. Isn't this wonderful? From New York. However, not so wonderful is that Beverly was in a car accident today and is newly cast on her foot, right?
My foot.
And is going forward with her story nonetheless. I mean,
Right.
from the hospital to us, I think it's remarkable.
And you have your dog and my cat is just coming up to say, give me attention.
Well, here's Oliver Wendell Holmes, everyone.
He's
Oliver
cute.
attends our swabs at the Arenda Library. And so I guess he's seeing the pictures and hearing your voices and decided he had to be part of it also tonight.
Well,
we want to hear your story, love. Go ahead.
well, thank you. I had a bad day. I ripped my ankle off the bone and I'm in a big cast and I can't walk on it for a couple weeks now. So I have plenty of time for storytelling now and writing new stories. And this is a new story that I told, I'm going to tell. And when I heard it, I cried. And I said, I need to share this story. Jews, get off the trains and drop everything and go towards the railroad. Just keep walking and drop everything. Just drop everything that you're holding, Jews, said the captain of the Nazi people there. The Nazi officer turned around. He was in a village in Poland. He looked at the Polish people who had gathered to see the Jews come off the trains that were going into the concentration camps. He said, help yourselves, everybody, to anything on the ground. These Jews won't need it anymore. Two Polish women were standing in the back. They saw this woman in this beautiful fur coat, very long into the ground and wrapped around her. And she stood there frozen. The women looked at each other. They wanted that coat. The two women nodded and ran towards her and ripped the coat off her back and ran with it back to the village into a little wooded area. With glee, they put it down and spread the coat. And they found beautiful candlesticks and jewelry and all these treasures. They had hit the jackpot. Now, who was going to get the coat? Well, the one woman picked it up and it was still heavy. There must have been a secret pocket filled with something. And the women went and found the secret pocket, and the one woman stuck her hands in and pulled out an infant, probably only a couple days old. The woman who picked up the baby got so excited. My husband and I have always wanted a child and couldn't have one. I'm going to take this child and raise it as my own. And the other woman looked at her and, okay. And she goes, with the baby in her arms, cuddling it, you take the coat and everything. I have my treasure in my arms. And so it was. The Polish woman raised this tiny little baby and brought her up and educated her. She went to college. She became a pediatrician, and everyone in the whole area loved her. She had a wonderful life. One day, though, her mother did pass away, and she was receiving people in mourning for her mother, and a knock was on the door. She opened it and saw it was her mother's friend, the same friend that I talked about that had found her when she was a baby. I need to sit down and talk to you. Your mother never told you the story, but I feel you need to be told this. And with some tears going down her eyes, she told her that we found you in this coat that we had ripped off your mother. And she told her the story of how this woman decided to raise her as her own daughter. The woman didn't believe it. The pediatrician said, I don't believe this. You're just making up a story. She goes, where's your mother's jewelry chest? I will show you something. So they went into the bedroom and she opened up the jewelry chest. And there was a handmade gold necklace with a Jewish star, very unusual, with some Hebrew letters on it. This was found around your neck when we found you. Your real mother must have put it around your neck. The woman finally believed her. The woman stayed in the Polish village as a pediatrician for a couple of years, and then went on vacation at another European country. And there were some Jewish boys there. And the Jewish boys, right before Shabbos, which is Friday night, was selling candles and other paraphernalia for the people going to be celebrating the new Shabbos coming in at sunset. And she talked to the boy. She told him her story. She goes, how do you think I can find out about maybe my real family, my Jewish heritage? Well, you should send a letter to the rabbi, and maybe he will be able to tell you who you really belong to and who your family was. So she started, writing to the rabbi, and finally she met. And he had said to her, I can't find your Jewish family and who you really are, but you are Jewish. Your necklace has your name on it. Go to Israel. They could use pediatricians. Maybe you'll find your Jewish faith. The pediatrician thought about it for a while and said, maybe I should go and take a vacation in Israel. And she did. And while she was there, she decided she wanted to stay and became a pediatrician at the hospital. And she met a husband and she had kids. And she had a wonderful life in Israel, bringing up her family. She was about 60 years old in 2004, when boom, there was a big explosion at a cafe, and many people, both children and adults, were hurt. Many were rushed to the hospital, including the children, where the pediatrician was working in the emergency room. She was working on some children, and a little old man came in saying, my granddaughter, I can't find my granddaughter. They tell me that she's here in the hospital. Help me, doctor. She said, well, what does she look like? Maybe we can go find her. He described his granddaughter, and he said, but she's also wearing a beautiful gold necklace. I was a goldsmith, and I made it for her mother when she was a baby. In fact, I had two daughters, and I made identical Jewish stars for each daughter with their name engraved in Hebrew. My one daughter didn't make it out of the concentration camps, but my other daughter did. And this is her daughter wearing her mother's necklace. The pediatrician froze. She looked at the old man. She looked at the little girl, which was about 15, and she looked at the necklace. She opened up the first couple buttons of her blouse and took out the identical necklace that matched the little girl's necklace. All three of them were staring at the necklaces. She took a deep breath. She looked at the man and she said, I am your daughter. You are my father. Please, this came from my book of Never Forget, Always Remember. And I hope all of you will remember this story the next time that people are treated the way the Nazis treated the Jews many years ago. Thank you.
Thank you. And here we have two lost children tonight who found their homes and found their families and found their place. But what a journey that must be, and what a time of upset and growth and fulfillment when at last you know where you belong and who you belong to. Yeah, very nice, very nice.
Thank you. It was a new story. I've only told it once before.
All right, all right. Good.
So any feedback would be appreciated.
Okay, nice. Why don't you give us an email in the chat or something where we can get a hold of you?
I would be glad to. Thank you.
And you mentioned that you're going to be home for a couple of weeks.
I sure am.
And you invite people to come and tell you their stories, and you will tell your stories to them. That would be charming.
I
wouldn't
would
it?
love it. I
Yeah,
would
we'll-
love it.
We'll
Thank
call
you.
you and tell you a story. Yay. Maybe you better put your phone number too.
Okay, I will.
Yeah.
All are welcome. I'll be glad to critique any stories, and I'm going to be working on quite a few new ones sitting home at, I can't drive a car and I can't go out of the house.
Okay. All right. From
Thank
California
you.
to New York. We'll try to make it happen. Okay. Thank
You
you.
can call up to 12 o'clock New York time.
Okay.
I'm going to be up late. I'm a night person.
All
Thank you. Thank you for allowing me to come from New York to visit you. I always love your group. I always enjoy your stories. I really like this group very much.
All right.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much for participating. We appreciate it. Renew. All right.
Yes,
Yes.
yes.
Hello, hello, hello. Hello
Hi.
from India. What time is it?
It's 10 past 8.
Oh, all right. Very good. All right. We're so thrilled to have you back again. Thank you for
I'm so
joining
thrilled
us.
too.
All
I
right.
loved your dog, by the way, Oliver, right?
What?
Your dog.
How's
You
your
can't-
dog? She's asking.
Oh, my dog. My dog is fine. My dog
Okay.
is fine. Yes.
Okay, so shall I start my story?
Yes, please do. And here.
You can hear me, right?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, okay. So the story today that I'm going to share with you is a story that I'm sharing for the very first time. It's from the ancient scriptures called Upanishads. And I rarely ever tell stories from Hindu mythology or from our ancient scriptures. Actually, Hinduism itself is not a religion, it's a way of life. And it is based on the principle of dharma, which is righteousness. So this story is from a particular scripture called the Kathopanishad. And this story is about a boy, a 12-year-old boy called Nachiketa. Now, Nachiketa was a son of a sage called Vajshavas. And in those days, sages used to have a fire sacrifice. And as soon as the sacrifice was over, they were supposed to give away all their possessions. It was one way of renouncing material wealth. So Nachiketa was standing right next to his father and watching him. He was so proud of his father for giving away his wealth. But as he watched him, he noticed that his father was giving away all the ill and unhealthy cows that could no longer give milk. He was giving these cows away to the poor and needy. He was shocked. How could his father do such a thing? His father was his hero. He loved him. He couldn't believe what his father was doing. So he said, "Father, But his father ignored him and continued to give away those cows. Once again, Nachiketa said, "Father." His father turned and looked at him and turned away again, did not answer. "Father," he shouted once again. And this time his father turned around and glared at him. So Nachiketa thought to himself, is my father doing this on purpose? Doesn't he know the law of dharma? And so he was so upset. He went to his father and said, "Father, am I not your possession too? Your most prized possession? Your only child? Who are you going to give me away to?" His father ignored him. But the boy was persistent. "Father, who are you going to give me away to? Tell me, Father." By now, Vajravas was furious. So without thinking, he said, "I'm giving you to Yama, the god of death." For a minute, Nachiketa was stunned. Then he turned around and started walking away. Vajravas realized what he had said. "Nachiketa, Nachiketa, come back, come back. I didn't mean that. I'm sorry, I was not in the right frame of mind." But for Nachiketa, his father's word was law. Just as something that is done cannot be undone, words that are said cannot be unsaid. And so Nachiketa set off to the abode of Lord Yama, the god of death. And he walked for many nights, many days, and finally he reached Yama's abode. But Yama was not at home. He was out collecting souls. And so Nachiketa sat there. He sat there for 3 days and 3 nights without food or water. And when Lord Yama came back, he was shocked to see such a young boy waiting for him. "What are you doing here?" he asked. "My father has given me to you. I'm your possession now," he said. "But it's not your time to die," said Yama. "But my father says I belong to you." Yama was horrified. He said, "I'm sorry. You've been waiting outside for 3 days and 3 nights without food or water? Come inside." He took the boy inside. And after he had given him some food and water, he said, "My boy, I'm sorry you were made to wait 3 days and 3 nights. I grant you 3 boons. So tell me, what do you want?" Nachiketa looked at him and said, "When I go back to my father, I want him to forgive me and welcome me back with open arms." "Done," said Yama. "My second boon, please tell me the right way to conduct the fire ritual." "Done," said Yama. "And the third, I want to know the truth about life and death. What happens after death?" Yama said, "I'm sorry, Nachiketa. This is not a question that I can answer. I cannot grant you this boon." But Nachiketa was firm. "I want to know. I want to know. I will not go back unless you tell me," he said. Yama tried his best to persuade him. "I'll give you lots of wealth. I'll give you a large palace. I'll give you gems. I'll give you lots and lots of money, gold, silver." But Nachiketa was resolute in his decision. "I want to know what is the truth," he said. And so finally, Yama had to tell him. He said, "The self is immortal. It neither dies nor is it born. It does not come out of anything, nor does anything come out of it. It cannot slay, nor can it be slain. It is beyond the body, the mind, and the senses. Self-realization does not come to everyone. The path to realizing the self is long and filled with trouble. But the one who pursues the goal will no longer be terrified of death, because that is the realization of the supreme self." After Yama shared this, Nachiketa was pacified and he set off on his journey back home. And that's the end of the story. Thank you for letting me share it. You're muted, Sally.
What a perfect story again for these times, you know, because we're all out there seeking. We're all out there looking.
Yeah.
Yes. And, you know, what is the truth of life and death? You know, and here again, this young boy, here again, we have a child seeking and, you know, looking for the things. And, you know, just, well, it's inspiring. That's all I can say. It was a very inspiring story. Thank you so
I
much.
don't know if all of you have heard of Swami Vivekananda. I think he's been to the US also many, many years ago.
Wait, too fast.
Swami Vivekananda.
Mm-hmm.
Swami Vivekananda was a disciple of one of the great sages in India. And he has been all over the world. And he said once that give me 12 boys like Nachiketa and I will turn this country around. Because Nachiketa was very resolute. He was a very symbol of integrity and honesty and so full of perseverance. You know, he was really, really very, very, very particular that he wants the truth and nothing but the truth.
And another thing that I found interesting was that it was a young boy who was making this understanding. Because as I listen to young people talk on the radio, on TV, etc. now, you know, about the different causes, I'm just amazed about how intelligent and wonderful these children are. So thank you again for sharing with us.
You're welcome. My pleasure.
All right. I think we'll do one more story and then we'll do a short break. Let's see, who's next?
Camille.
Camille?
Uh-huh.
Yes, it's Camille.
Howdy.
Yes. Camille.
Hi.
Where are you?
In my
Right
home.
there.
Oh, there you are.
Go ahead. I guess so. All right. Like two cats in a street fight, I was awakened by the shrieks of the howling wind, objects blowing around in my backyard. I pressed my face into the glass, and the first thing I noticed was dirt. I really got to clean this glass. Squinting through, I saw my 1970s bright orange lounge chair in the pool. It was one of its kind, kept for nostalgia. Like first responders jumping into action, I saw the other lounge chairs grab the pool net skimmer and thrust its long handle through the legs of the orange chair. Working together, 1, 2, 3, heave! 1, 2, 3, heave! They pulled the orange chair out of the pool. He began to cough and sputter. Why did you guys save me? I'm tired of being the only 70s lounge chair. And if you haven't noticed, I'm bright orange. I stick out like a lit match in a dark room, like a giraffe in a flock of sheep, like a rodeo clown at the ballet. The people don't lay on me anymore, and I don't feel wanted. The other chairs chimed in. Orange chair? That's not true. You're the first chair that people notice when they come out in the backyard. They talk about the year you were born and how long you've been around. Can't you see how special you are? No, I can't. That's it. We're taking you to a therapist. The chairs disappeared from the backyard and I heard the back door open. I crouched and peeked around the corner. They were all headed to the restroom. Dr. Hine, Dr. Behind. The lid of the toilet flew open. Who's there? Dr. Hine, this is an emergency. Orange chair jumped into the pool and he really needs your help. Okay, bring him in. Orange chair timidly tapped his way into the restroom and shut the door while the other chairs shuffled back to the backyard. Like James Bond, dun, 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 dun. I crawled over and pressed my ear to the door. What's the problem, Orange chair? The people don't lay on me anymore. Sometimes they put their wet dog on me and it shakes its fur and smacks me in the face with its soggy tail. They don't love me like they used to. You wouldn't understand. Well, I have some idea. How would you know? You've never even been outside. Precisely. And yet, I'm happy. Those humans squat on me every day. I have smelled unsmellable smells. I serve them through better or for worse, or sickness or health. We all have a different role in life, Orange Chair. The goal is to be the best you can be in the role that you've been given. And if your role is to look beautiful around the pool, then do that. Uh, Beautiful? Yes, Orange Chair, beautiful. Life can be tough at times, that we can't let those tough times define us. And I bet I can guess that that dastardly dirty dog isn't on you every day. Am I right about that? Well, yes, you're right. I do understand how you're feeling, Orange Chair. I and my two brothers, John and Lou, felt the same way until we were reminded of how special we are. Something goes wrong with us, we become the most important things in the whole house. It's the same with you, Orange Chair. It's your orangenness that makes you special. It makes you stand out. It makes you not like the other chairs, nor should you be. You have orange swag and nostalgia hype, just like that 1970s tang. Gee, I feel better already. I guess I just let my emotions run away with me. Thank you, Dr. Behind. You're welcome, Orange Chair. And Orange Chair, yes, don't ever look down on the things that make you special. I disappeared behind a china cabinet in enough time to see Orange Chair strut down the hall, through the back door, and back to the pool. My backyard has been different since that windy night. Sometimes I think I hear Orange Chair laughing and joking with the other chairs about how special he is. But that might just be my imagination.
Okay, I have to comment, Camille. That was great. That was so much fun.
You're special. You're special. How did that come to your mind about the orange chair? What was the seed that brought that story forward?
Well, actually, it was a windy night, and I actually did wake up to the orange chair that's around the pool, inside the pool, and I thought the chair's committing suicide. So I wrote a story about it.
Oh, wonderful. Okay, all right, yes. Very good. All right, let's take a small break now. How about just 3 or 4 minutes? And then come back, okay?
Come back at 8.
Oh,
Is that good?
that's too long, I think. All right. All right, we'll make it 8. Okay, come back at 8. Be sure you come back now. Let's see you.
Oh, Marnie, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Should I move to a different room? Is that light too bad? What do you think?
Let's see.
Or Sally? I can,
I wait, I don't see you. Hold on a minute.
Hang on. I will put
Hold
you
on.
up here. There you go.
I can go to another room with my computer.
It's up to you.
Because that window is very,
It's
yeah.
very bright and
The
bad.
sun is still up. Last month
Right.
it wasn't at this time. So,
Yeah.
Mhm.
so I will go to another room.
Okay. Perfect for break time.
Okay.
so who's next? Colleen?
Yes, I am, but I turned myself off. So now
Okay. Well, we're going to finish very early.
Sorry I got on a little late. I was on another Zoom before this, but I was here nice and early yesterday when I thought it was scheduled.
Go away.
Hello, can you hear me?
Who's talking?
Beverly, can you hear me?
Beverly
Yes,
Schwartz?
I'm getting a little tired, so I might kind of fade out in a little while, okay?
Okay, love.
Okay, I took
Okay.
some medicine, so it's gonna make me sleepy, okay?
Yeah, take care of yourself.
Yeah,
Thank you. It's been a long day.
I imagine so.
Oh, too long. Thank you.
thank you.
I'll try to hang around for one more story or so, okay?
Loved your story. That was really poignant.
Thank you. Hopefully I can get some sleep tonight.
Is it time, Sally?
Yes, it's time. All right, Colleen, are you there? We can't hear you. Unmute.
Hello, I'm having a hard time figuring out where to put the light. So
Yeah,
if you see me wandering around,
okay, because
Okay.
we're ready to start.
okay, that'll be good. That'll just have to do.
Let's see what's happening. Sit down.
You have a halo over your head.
Have a
All
halo.
right, I'm angelic.
Can you put it down and have it shine up into your face?
Oh no, I tried that. I could go back to the other room.
Well,
It's better.
it'll have to do. Don't look right into the light though.
Oh, see, that's worse.
Worse.
It's not a scary story, so that would be inappropriate. I'll go back to the other room.
All right. Okay. Maybe we should have Terry.
Well, no, it's just,
Okay, does anybody have any announcements, by the way? And how would I know?
Unmute yourself if you have an announcement.
Anyone with an announcement? No? All right.
if anyone is interested in poetry, song, and spoken word that has to do with peace and social justice, the People's Music Network for Songs of Freedom and Struggle will be having our summer convergence on the first weekend of June online. And you can go to peoplesmusic.org, and I'll put more information in the chat.
Okay, good. Thank you. Thank you. Do that. Thank you. All right, Colleen, I think you're good.
All right.
The
Well-
writing is very romantic.
Oh, good. It's not a romantic story. Good evening, everyone. I knew that Larry was coming, so I picked a Western story, but his wasn't quite West. It was sort of middle of the country, but I picked a Western story. And I've been telling stories. Several years ago, I used to volunteer at the Berkeley Indigenous Day powwow, and a lady there told me that you should honor all of your ancestors. Well, my ancestors have been in this country a long time, and so they've met people from many different cultures and intermarried with each other. So I can't say my ancestors came from, I'd have to list several countries. But so I've been telling German stories because my dad's quite a bit German, and his German ancestors came to this country in the 1740s for religious freedom, and they settled in Pennsylvania because William Penn was very tolerant, unlike many people of his time. And so, but this time I'm going to tell a story from my mother's side. My mother's mother was half Lakota and half French Canadian. And Lakota is what we normally call, what most people would call the Sioux. And this is a story from a long, long time ago. And then I had to realize I had to say some historical background because a lot of in different states, you earn different education. So I'm going to say a little background that we learned when I learned in 3rd grade, but I don't think people in California learn at all. And this is a story, well, it takes a place, it's about the Lakota, and it's called The Holy Dog, the story is. And it's when the horse first came to the Lakota people. Now, the modern horse is not indigenous to the Americas, even though there's wild horse herds throughout the plains. It was brought in by the Spanish. And now when I was in 3rd grade, we learned how the horses got on the plains. Well, before the Mexicans, the Spanish missions came to, when Mexico was part of Spain, came to California, they sent missionaries into the Southwest. That's what we call Arizona and New Mexico now. Well, and the first missionaries went there around 1598, and in California, just to give you a thing, in California, the first missions didn't get here till around the 1770s. So they were there, and they settled among the Pueblo and the Apache people. But this was early, so in 1598 and thereafter, the Inquisition was still going on in Spain. So they were very hard on the indigenous religion, and they killed a lot of the leaders in the same manner that they killed in Spain as they killed the heretics and the people that weren't part of their group. And so the Pueblos got mad, and on June 10th, 1680, they rebelled. And with their allies, the Apaches, and the Pueblos are a very peaceful people, but it was just too much for them, and they rebelled. And they released the horses. There were some survivors reached New Orleans, and some reached back to Mexico, and they expelled all the Spanish and Mexican priests, and they didn't try to re-enter their territory for 12 years. But there was a lot of horses that got released during that conflict time. So that's how all the horses were on the plains. And so this is a story about the Lakota. And the Lakota were, well, some of them, they were nomadic, but oftentimes they would plant corn or other grains or the native grains in America. And but they wouldn't live there. They would move around and then they would come back when the plants were ripe. So they did a lot of traveling. But before the horse, they did the walking. But they had great big dogs that were sort of a brown color with hair. And the dogs, like you see the movies with the horses pulling travois, the dogs would pull the travois. So they didn't carry all their stuff. The dogs pulled it too, like the horses did in the movies that you see. But they had done this for centuries, and they were going more out on the plains at this time because in during the French and Indian Wars, the Lakota weren't on either side, but the Indians that were on the side of the French gave them guns, and the Indians or the Native Americans that were on the side of the Americans, I mean the English gave them guns, and the Sioux didn't get guns. So they moved out further west onto the plains, and when they had their camps, they would be big circles, and there would be grass in the middle, and it'd be sort of a casual affair. And they were, a lot of Native peoples in many countries are part of nature. So they would wake up and there would be buffalo grazing by their teepees, or there'd be deer grazing by their teepees. And one day there was this animal that was grazing by the teepee, and they had never seen it before. And it was a beautiful animal. It wasn't like a buffalo. It wasn't like a deer. It wasn't like a bear. It wasn't like a wolf. It wasn't like anything they had ever seen. And the most astounding part of it, it wasn't afraid of people. So the people went up and they stood on it, and the horse just didn't get scared and just kept grazing. And one of the young men decided to get a rawhide rope, and he said, well, I'll see if I can tame it like the dog. And so he went and got a rope, because the animal had such beautiful brown eyes that were calm, and he wasn't frightened. So the young man got the rope, and first the horse shied away because he didn't get used to men. But after 5 or 10 minutes, the horse let the man put the lasso around his neck, and everyone came up, and the horse was very gentle, and all the people petted it and everything. And so after a while, one of the young men said, well, I'm going to sit on it. So he sat on it. And then more and more horses came as the years passed. The horses that were left, released in that war kept coming up north. I mean, they formed herds and animals and social hierarchies, and they came north, and then more horses came north, and more horses were adopted into the people. And they became the companion, like the dog was their companion. And that's how the horse, but they didn't have the word horse for the people. So they called it, in Lakota, they called it the holy dog. And that's how the horse came to the people.
Very good. I wondered how I got horses here. I'm a horse crazy person.
Oh, okay, yes. My mother was horse crazy, but oh yes, and I know.
There's me with my horse.
Oh, all right.
Bolero.
Yes.
And Bob and his horse. Yes. So you wonder when you get a horse and they have these peculiarities, you wonder where in the hell did they come from?
Well, the quarter horse. The quarter horse. Well, I took at summer school in grade school. I turned the horse. There was a little horse that evolved in America, but it died off the same time the giant sloths died off. But apparently the little horse crossed the bridge into Asia and was bred into the modern horse in Asia, and the Spanish brought it back.
How about that? Okay, good. Good, thank you, thank
I'm
you.
sorry, I didn't mean more lecture, but I wanted to tell that story.
Yes, and I don't blame you. All right, let's give an applause. I didn't give a chance to give an applause here. Thank you, thank you, thank you. All right, Terry, are you ready?
You
He's
need to
mute.
unmute,
Yes,
Terry.
I am unmuted now. And I unmuted myself. So what is this thing here? Okay, let me get rid of this. Okay, can you hear me? Everybody hear me? Okay. I suspect that for most of us here tonight, that things in life that are apparently unjust and injustice as just the whole way of being in the world upsets you. It does me, it gets me upset, and will tell you I get really in a kind of twisted mind whenever things that are unjust are apparent. And there's so many cases of it in the world today. And then there are little places where justice comes out and prevails. And that's when I get a little boost again and hope that things will be better in the world. And someday that the arc of justice, as Martin Luther King talked about, will prevail. So I call this story The Art of Justice. I was an average student. You know, I got in grade school and lower grades, I got B's, B pluses. Occasionally I'd get a C in a subject that I struggled with. Mathematics sometimes confounded me. But the places where I get A's and A pluses was in art. I loved to draw. I loved colored pencils. And that's what I did as a kid. I'd skip up my room and just draw, and I drew cartoons and I drew all kinds of things, and I loved it. And apparently the art teachers who were following me, they appreciated what I was doing, and they gave me A's, and my parents were pleased. And why don't you bring up your grades in other subjects? But I didn't love the other subjects like I loved art. So I go through, you know, lower grades, middle school, and I get to high school. And all of a sudden, this is a whole different world. And now I'm walking down hallways after the bell rings, and I'm going to my first art class in high school. And I go in this room, and the teacher's name, I'm not going to give her last name, because in case some of her relatives may still be around, I don't want to upset them too much, but her name, I'll call her Mrs. M for the purposes of this story. And I get in my seat, and I'm really excited to be there, because now art at high school is going to be a whole other level. And I'm looking around, and I see other kids at their desks, and she's handing out the assignment. And I'm not paying attention because I'm looking around the class, and all of a sudden I realized that I hadn't heard something in the assignment. So I turned to another person, and I started to talk to them about what the assignment was. And all of a sudden, I'm yanked out of my chair. Mrs. M has grabbed me by the ear, and there will be no talking in class, Terry. And she puts me in a corner and makes me stand there for the entire class facing the wall. I was in shock. I really was. And I'd never been manhandled like that, even at home when I was an incorrigible child and I got into some trouble, but nobody had grabbed me by the ear. 2 days later, I was back in her class again, and I'll be darned if she didn't do it again because I whispered something to somebody. And I was interested in what other kids were doing with their assignments. I wanted to get up and see, and it was an exciting thing to see what other people were doing with this assignment. But no, sir. Anytime I made any kind of a peep at all, if I didn't sit in my chair like a proper little soldier and keep my nose to whatever I was supposed to be doing, she physically abused me throughout the whole freshman year. I kept my mouth shut. I didn't tell my parents about it. I just figured, well, I must be a really bad kid and I'm doing something wrong. So I'm trying to keep my nose down and keep quiet as long as I didn't talk up or do anything out of her ordinary, what she wanted in her class. That was okay. Sophomore year came and there was my art class again. And I was terrified of what that was going to be like. Another year of that, I don't know what would have happened, but I had to take it. And I go walking into class, and there's a woman teaching art for the sophomores. Her name was Mrs. San Janito. She was a voluble, big, massive, jolly woman, an Italian lady, and she was a ball. I mean, she was fun, she was funny, had a sense of humor. She encouraged collaboration amongst the kids. We all got up and walked around the classroom and looked at other people's work and talked about it and critiqued it, but critiqued it with all positive stuff. And she was a blast. She was fun and funny. And I couldn't wait to get to art class. And I had her for my sophomore and junior year. Now, in my junior year, something really weird happened. Some kids got together and thought that I would make a good class president. So they nominated me for this thing. And friends of mine got around me and supported me and said, you know, you got to do this. And I didn't want to do it, but they kind of pushed me. And even one of my friends came over and helped me write my speech that I was supposed to make. So I made the speech in front of, it was a large high school. I had 300 kids in my graduating class there. And I got up, made the speech, and by gosh, I got elected. There was other people that were so much better qualified than me, but next thing I knew, I'm a class president. And it's my senior year. And I have all kinds of responsibilities now to come up with assemblies and introduce speakers and come up with fund drives and all kinds of things that I was supposed to do. And my first class in my senior year each day was art. And it began, I had Mrs. M. Now I'm 17 years old, and I'm not, you know, a little kid that you can grab by the ear and throw in a corner anymore. But she did it verbally. Anytime I came into that classroom after, you know, my assembly responsibilities of counting the money and all kinds of things, and I was invariably about 10 minutes late getting into her class, she got on me verbally. Oh, here comes Mr. Big Shot. Mr. Big Shot, who's never going to amount to anything. I mean, he's not a good artist at all. And you know, he thinks he's somebody, but he's never going to amount to anything. And I put up with that abuse for my entire senior year. It's time to go to college. I'm getting my applications and I'm filling them out, and I'm filling out applications because the only thing I'm really good at is art. So I'm filling out applications to Pratt, Rhode Island School of Design, Brown, Los Angeles School of Design. I was looking everywhere and sending out all kinds of applications. And each day I'd come in from playing or doing whatever I did, my paper route or whatever I was doing, I'd look for the mail and my mom would say, all rejections, Terry. Every single time there was a letter back from one of these places where I had applied, I was getting rejected. I also applied to Syracuse University. And I got a letter of acceptance from Syracuse. But I found out many years later why that happened. I dated a girl in 7th grade, and her sister, older sister, was graduating from Syracuse University as a top art student and sculptor. She won awards and stuff. And she happened to be in the Dean of Admissions office one day and looked down on his desk, and thank God she could read upside down. She saw my application on his desk. And she said, oh, I see Terry Stokes has applied here. Isn't that wonderful? He's a really good guy. He dated my sister at 7th grade, and my family has known him for all these years. He's a wonderful guy, and he's a very talented artist. And he said, well, this isn't the acceptance pile. This is the rejection pile. We're turning him down. And she said, no, you can't do that. Why? Why would you turn him down? He said, well, you should read what his art teacher, Mrs. M, says about him here. And she turned it over and she said, you can't believe this woman, Dean. She is a monster. She is somebody who's ruined all kinds of people's lives because she's a terrible, terrible psychotic person. I recommend you accept him and you won't be sorry. So he took my application and he put it over in the acceptance pile. Years go by. I get married, I go in the army, I do my 2 years of military duty, I come out and I get a job here and I get a job there. And I finally come down to New York City and I get a job in an advertising agency as a, bullpen guy in the bullpen. And very quickly I got breaks and all of a sudden I was an assistant art director. And next thing I knew, I was a full art director. And I got hooked up with a very good creative writer who was hot at that time. And she and I moved from agency to agency until finally we landed at a very hot new agency in town. And I became I became a vice president, associate creative director of this agency. And one day my secretary came in and said, Mr. Stokes, we have a lady on the line who says she needs to talk to you about the Mrs. Sanjanito campaign. I said, but Mrs. Sanjanito, oh, Mrs. Sanjanito, I remember her. Let me talk to her. So I pick up the phone. She talks to me and tells me that there's a big meeting coming up. The whole Yonkers school board is going to take up the issue of why Mrs. Sanjanito should be dismissed from being an art teacher because Mrs. Muller says that she's a very bad teacher and she wants her out of that school and wants to take over the art department all by herself. And we're getting people together to write letters on behalf of Mrs. Sanjanito. Would you be willing to write a letter on behalf of her? Let's see. Would I be willing to write a letter supporting Mrs. Sanjanito and telling what I know about Mrs. M? I walked out to my secretary's office and I took a nice big piece of embossed stationery with my name on it. Terry Stokes, Associate Creative Director, Senior Art Director of William Free and Company. And I wrote a letter and it was a doozy. I've never written a better letter. And about a month later, I heard back from the Mrs. Sanjanito committee. And Mrs. Muller had been thrown out on her ear, and Mrs. Sanjanito had been instated as the head art teacher at Roosevelt High School. And so, the art of justice did flow in this particular case. And I just felt so good about having righted something that was so wrong. And it's my hope in the world that Dr. Martin Luther King's arc of justice will start swinging more and more so that the Mrs. M's of the world will be in the dust heap and Mrs. Sanjanitos of the world will be elevated to high positions. That's my story. And I'm glad to be able to tell it.
All right, thank you. Were you like in your class, were other boys picked on or just you?
No, it seemed to be me. She had something about me that bugged her. And I don't know what it was. The other boys stayed pretty quiet. And most of the class, by the way, was mostly girls, as I recall. I think I was one of maybe 3 boys in the class when I was with her.
Yeah. But what we have to go through when we meet those kind of teachers is, it stayed with you all this time, right?
Well, I mean, it's just, I think back on how lucky I was that Marianne Ellison happened to be in that dean's office at that time, and my paper was on that desk.
Yeah.
If she hadn't been there, I'd be slinging burgers at Mickey D's today, I'm sure.
Oh, I thought that's what you did. Oh, I didn't know that. And this cartoony thing behind you.
Oh, well, this is part of the background of a thing that Ann and I are involved in. If you want a little plug for what we're doing, we're in a production through Stagebridge called The Dell. And each of us has taken on a persona from, was it fairy tales or not fairy tales, but nursery rhymes. And Ann is Mary Contrary, and I'm Jumbo, who is really Humpty Dumpty, and we have Snow White, and we have Cinderella, and we have this play that we're putting on called Saving the Dell. It's called The Dell, and if you guys are interested in it, you can look it up through Stagebridge, and it will be probably available sometime we expect in early July, mid-July.
All right, good.
It's got
Thank
music.
you.
and scripts. So thank you. I'm sorry to take up so much
Oh,
time.
no, plenty of time, plenty of time. Thank
Can you
so much.
put the link for that in chat?
Yeah, when we have it. We're still in production and working right now, you know, but when it comes up, I'll let Sally know and can put it up on your chat so everybody in the swamp can find out about it.
Well, we're going to end a little early tonight, but that's all right. But before we end, I think we need to all, can you give me the gallery view? And I want to have everybody applaud for our wonderful, wonderful tellers tonight. Yay.
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 Terrific. Thank you very
Yay.
much.
Thank you very much.
Great.
And
Sally, aren't you going to tell tonight?
yeah, I am.
Good.
I have one more thing to say though. Liz, as you may know, has gone to Israel. She has a grandchild there that she's never seen. So that's why she's not with us this evening. And let's keep our prayers going for her. She seemed to feel that it was quite safe. I'm not sure what airport she flew into. So I think the airport in Jerusalem is closed to commercial traffic. So I'm not sure where she flew into, but I will hear from her. She said she would email me. So anyway, she's on an adventure with her husband to see her grandchild and her daughter. And so I guess we'll end the evening as we traditionally do with a story from Moi. And I don't know about you, but I had a wonderful, wonderful Mother's Day. And when I think of Mother's Day, of course, I have to think of my own mother, and I think of this story. And if you've heard it before, that's because I usually try to find some place to tell it every Mother's Day because it tickles me. So let's see. All right. My mother was a flapper. And you know, that's all about style. And my mother had a dress, a party dress that she loved. It was a cut velvet, orange velvet dress. And it had crystal beads from the boat neck to the hemline, which was above the knee. And it was worn with a gold lame slip underneath. And she wore gold lame pointed toed pumps with a T-strap and a gold lame band around her head. Now, how do I know that? Well, shortly after my mother passed, my father sent me a box. And when I opened it up, there was a note. And he said, I found this dress in your mother's closet, and I thought maybe you would like to have it. And I took out the dress, and it was this orange velvet dress. Beautiful, still intact, still almost perfect. And when I saw that, I immediately picked up the phone and called my Aunt Gert, who was my mother's sister. And I told her about the dress. And she said, oh, yes, I remember that dress. Yes, I do. It was one of your mother's favorite party dresses. And I have to change stools. I'm so sorry. Hold on, I'll be right back. I have to come into this chair because I have to do this dramatic posture for you in just a moment. And I need a chair with a back. And she said, I remember your mother wearing that dress. She loved that dress. She would wear it to something fancy, like a dance at a hotel or a country club or something like that. And she'd put that dress on. And then when she got to where the event was being held, she'd look around for the perfect chair. And she'd sit in that chair, draped on it. And she'd cross her legs because, you know, your mother had beautiful legs and beautiful ankles. And she'd sit there with a glass of champagne or wine and look around. I don't think she ever took anything out of the glass. And she'd look around, and pretty soon there'd be a circle of boys around her, just looking at your mother. Your mother was one party girl. My mother was a party girl. My mother, Fanny Ida, was a party girl. I couldn't believe it. My mother was 40 when she had me, and when I went to grammar school, her hair had already turned gray. I thought I had the oldest mother in the world. My mother had been married 15 years when she had me, long enough to become my father's shadow. She moved where he wanted to move. She entertained the people he wanted entertaining. She even went to the church of his choice. My mother, a party girl, I really couldn't see it at all. And then I remembered an occasion. My sister and I accompanied my mother to Marshall Field's department store in Chicago because she was going to buy a very special dress for my aunt's 50th anniversary. And we went to the couturier department, and they usher you into this huge dressing room with mirrors all around. And a saleswoman comes in and asks you what you want, and then she goes and brings in the dresses. And so my mother explained. The sales lady left. She returned with an armful of dresses and began to hang them up in the dressing room on hooks. This one had sequins. This one had ruffles. This one had feathers. This one had fruit. It looked like a flock of birds. And my mother, who was of short stature and very small, and the shoes, the gold lame shoes had been traded for Dr. Schul's black Oxfords. And my mother would look at these dresses and put one on after the other. And finally, she looked at the saleswoman and said, "Do you have something with a tailored top and maybe something less foo-foo-y?" And so the sales lady said, "Oh, I know just what you want, just what you want." And she went out and then returned pretty soon with a blue chiffon dress. And it was lovely on the top. It was really lovely. But on the skirt, it had so much fabric, enough fabric for a Christos installation. I mean, it was huge. And the saleswoman helped my mother into the dress. And then she said, I'll just leave you here and you can look at this with your children. It's just lovely on you, just lovely. And she exited. And my mother looked at herself in the mirror, this little head and little chest with this huge expansive skirt. And then she picked up the skirt and started to Charleston. 5'2", ice up blue, oh, with the black shoes, with the black Oxfords on. And then she took the skirt and did a flamenco little thing here and a little thing there. And we began to laugh. We began to laugh, and how it was excruciating, holding our stomachs. I mean, tears coming down our eyes, and the poor saleswoman is knocking on the door. Is everything all right in there? Is everything all right in there? And now I have a dress. I bought this dress after my graduation from college to take with me to New York. It was going to be my sophisticated dating dress. It's a black wool dress, high in the front, long sleeves, fits very narrow, but it plunges to the back, right down there. And I have put it in a box and I have put it on the shelf of my closet. And my daughter someday, who will obviously clean out the closet, will open the package and she'll look at this dress and she'll see what size it is and know that it fit me very well. And then she will look at the back and realize how far it plunges. And then she will look at the dress and look at that, and she will remember this little form in front of you. And then she will begin to smile and say, "I bet my mother was a party girl, and a hot one at that." Good night, all. Good night, all. We'll see you next Thursday, next month, fourth Thursday of the year, or fourth Thursday of the month. Thank you all for attending. Do spread the word about the Contra Costa Tail Spinners, and come back and see us again next month. Blessings to you all. Bye-bye.
That was great.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Wonderful.
Night.
Thank you.